Yo, what's up? So today on Fearless Conversations, we're gonna get into the Biden administration and how we think the policies of that administration will affect the black community. So again, yeah. So with the Biden administration, I had been I hadn't been looking too much into it because I feel like politics in general it's not really beneficial for black people specifically because we've had politicians that's been in office that they say they'll do a lot of things and things just never get done for us. So I think we really do need to focus on how we're going to move forward with politics in general. But as for the Biden administration, I noticed that he did mention that in his first 100 days he wanted to address like COVID, economic recovery, climate, racism, and immigration. Those are the highlighted things that stuck out to me when um when I've been hearing about what he plans on doing for his first 100 days in office. Um, but if you want to go in more about what you know, you can go ahead and.
Yeah, man. I basically, wanted to address some of this also, just as a backdrop in terms of, I'm in my feelings, man, my intellectual feelings, though,
Mm,
in the sense that we lived through the whole lead up to the election where, you had those of us that were saying we need to get tangibles for our vote and no tangibles, no vote. You had different factions of Black America, whether that was ADOS, uh, foundational Black Americans or American descendants of slaves, or even we know Ice Cube came out with his contract. Basically, it was the collective voice saying, in order to get our vote, we need something tangible, something that we can identify for us, not just we're gonna vote for this raggedy thing because the other raggedy thing is worse. That's a non-starter. It's a non-choice. When you give people two damaging things, it's like saying, "Do you want vomit or crack?" And
right.
like you forcing a person to pick between the lesser of two evils, but it's still evil. And I don't think us as Black people in this country we're going to get anything nutritious until we stand on it and then refuse. Maybe we need a hunger strike, right? Instead of deciding between vomit and crack. But anyway, that being said, leading up to the election, I saw a lot of people went and voted for Biden Harris ticket, and you know, myself amongst them, I was of the one. I was of the voice, the opinion that said we should withhold our vote and
Mm-hmm.
let them put in who they're gonna put in. And when they and after they do that, at least our voice would have been heard by way of not voting.
Right.
Now we got this guy in here who, uh, you know, he said he's gonna do these things within the first day and the first 100 days, and basically this show, myself, Fayah, and Kanan Powers, we're going to basically just chop it up off the top of the head and decide and just talk about what it's going to mean for Black people in Black America. So,
Sweet.
yeah.
Nope,
So
that's cool.
you mentioned Kanan, Joe Biden, and his one of the first things you said was rejoining the Paris Agreement, i.e., the climate issue. I'm looking at a headline right here in this article printed out. This comes from usatoday.com, News and Politics, stated January 20th of 2021. The headliner says Joe Biden rejoins Paris Agreement, comma, requires masks on federal property and swift one-day directives. One thing I have highlighted here is that Biden signed 15 executive orders and two other directives Wednesday, and several more will come over the next 10 days. So, that being said, I know we had talked a little bit about uh, Biden's famous, infamous scolding of the Black leadership during that conference, where he
Mm-hmm.
said that he wasn't going to make any, presidential executive orders, or his hands was essentially tied on much of that because the Republicans would be able to shoot it down. So What was you saying about that? No.
Yeah, so basically just what you said. He said he wasn't that wasn't going to be what he wanted to do. He don't want to do executive orders on executive orders, but he kind of tried to justify it and say he'll use it to undo what Trump did. And for some reason, um the opposing parties won't stop that, which make no sense. But then he won't use it to for it to benefit black people, basically, in a nutshell. So I think that spoke volumes, because he pretty much said he can use executive orders and he's willing to do it to undo what Trump did, but he's basically just not willing to do it to for the advancement of black people.
Right.
And I wouldn't expect nothing less of him. So it ain't no reason for you to tell me what you're not gonna do. That's how I look at it. Like, if he wasn't gonna use executive orders, he didn't even have to mention that. But to say it to your face like I'm not gonna do that, it's kind of like just shooting you down. So you say, hey, we say as a black people, this is what we want, and you tell me 100 ways you ain't gonna do it. That's
Right.
kind of how I took it.
And Kanan, yeah, just commenting on that, it's striking to me how when he voiced the way he voiced and expressed himself to the so-called black leadership during that conference, uh, it's an echo, bro. It's an echo of what he's been voicing throughout the entire campaign. And if we rewind back and listen to those previous echoes and what it sounded like, when he said things like reparations, what's that? And,
Mm-hmm.
reparations, I'll tell you one, we're a country of immigrants, and I'm not going to think of doing reparations unless Native Americans can get it. And
Mm-hmm.
Hispanics need help too. And there are children in cages and everything. And it
Right.
was always sort of this scolding and redirecting in popular media, or whenever he was asked a question about what could be done specifically for Black people.
Right.
And the sort of condescending attitude and tone that he takes.
Here, let's listen to a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm gonna play a little bit of it since I got it pulled up. Hold up.
All right.
To serve their time, have every single right restored to them. That's been my position before it was anybody else's position. I've been out pushing that. In addition to that, I think it's really important that no one goes to prison for a drug offense. Nobody. They go into rehabilitation. Rehabilitation. That's what we should be building rehabilitation centers, not more prisons. I have a I have a $20 billion effort that I'm proposing to get states to change their sentencing guidelines so that there is no more mandatory sentences across the board. In addition to that, we're talking about having diversity hiring in every agency. I promise you that is going to happen. We're just getting started here. Police reform, judicial reform. Look, if you notice, when I was chairman of the Judiciary Committee and when I was advising the president, who did we get on the court? We got on a woman who worked for me, became a member of the Supreme Court. Another woman who was a leading Hispanic in America, no one paid attention to, is on the court. All the people that I pushed on the court have been really pro civil rights judges across the board. And I, like you, the idea, Kristen, that everybody has to be a prosecutor. I'm a public defender. When I'm president of the United States of America, we're going to see to it that public defenders, federal defenders, get paid the same as federal prosecutors. Mm-hmm. So we can attract people. There's a whole range of things I guess I'm trying to say here. Look, the whole idea of equity is built into everything we've done. For example, I laid out my COVID team. Nobody's ever done this before. We're going to have Marcela Nunez Smith, but she is going to have one job. We have an equity task force. Her entire job is to deal with the inequity that exists because of racial discrimination. And Ms. Campbell, that's what this is all about. Making sure that, you may remember, I'm the first person, black or white, who called attention to the fact that you were finding that there was the rate of people who were African Americans were dying was 3 times that of white people. That's because a friend of mine, a white guy who happens to be, as you well know, Derek, the mayor of the city of Detroit, called me to tell me about it. I insisted that we keep a record on everything that happened since then. Guys, guess what I'm saying, guys, is, I mean what I say. The hard part here is I'm going to have a lot of trouble. We're going to have a lot of trouble getting a lot of this done with this Congress. And so the question is, for example, I'm going to be appointing at least, and look, the reason I'm not telling you who the other black maybe cabinet positions I'm going to appoint are is because it'll get out. And guess what? I can't defend them. They're going to be out there by themselves without any defense before their name. They're going to get ripped to shreds. That's why I'm going to wait. You will be pleased, I believe. You will be pleased to see there'll be more African Americans in major positions within a cabinet in major spots and more Hispanics in major spots than ever in American history. That's going to happen. I promise you that. And the other thing is, for example, thus far, for example, when we went ahead and we made sure that, I have as, the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, but in number 2 is Wally Adeyemo, an African American, who was the number 2 guy with real authority at that department. Look underneath just what we're doing in addition to the people we've already named. You're going to see people, look, and Cecilia Rouse, Cece, she is a significant player. That's a serious position. But it's like when I name her, well, I don't know if that counts. I'm not so sure. Well, if it doesn't count for y'all, well, the hell with y'all. But because it's real. It's real. So all I'm saying.
Hold up. See, now I want to. Now I kind of want to rewind it a little bit so you could hear the beginning. That's just like the ending of it.
Hey man, I think we get it, man. Did he just say the hell with y'all?
He said, "The hell with y'all, man." Basically, to their faces, as to their faces as it can be.
Right.
With COVID.
Yeah, man. It's interesting. He mentions civil rights. He mentions Hispanics. He mentions uh, racial discrimination, quote unquote. It's amazing. It's curious how they use the language, but it's so ambiguous in the sense that we know civil rights means not just black people, but immigrants. It means LGBTQ community people. It means
Right.
uh, in what do you call it? Incapacitated, physically disabled people.
Yep.
It means white females. And then even here, when you're talking about policy in the absence of reparations, when you have such a huge racial wealth gap between black people and the rest of the community at large, and it's a scale where we're so far behind and we're worth nothing by and large, besides the few standout superstars in our community. We're basically worth nothing, and in the absence of true economic justice, where there's such a racial wealth gap, it doesn't matter how much policy he talks about in terms of these other categories because we're not in a position to benefit from it. We're
Exactly. Yep.
homeless, you know?
That's facts. It's that simple though. It's like I think for some people it's that simple. Like it's not really a long conversation to have. Like it's not going to be beneficial to us when you look at it for face value. Like they can use the same words they've been using for generations, but we see that those words basically mean what you just described. So
Yeah, Kanana, rising tide lifts all boats, right? But what if you sitting there in an inner tube, or you're sitting there on a piece of driftwood, right? Or your boat's got holes in the bottom and it's sinking. Actually a rising tide in that instance is gonna do you more harm than good.
right.
So sort of
Yeah.
this sort of catch-all policy. I'm gonna do this for some of the things, like if you didn't think about it, would sound good on the surface, like, okay, we're not gonna put people in jail for nonviolent drug offense, or some of those other things that he said. Now we know that's a blanket policy that you would assume would benefit black people more, but in the
Right.
absence of reparation and in the presence of a racial wealth gap, we are more inclined to have to sort of make ends meet outside of mainstream market and job economies, which is going to
Exactly.
consistently put us in positions of being in violation of law, existing laws, or being homeless, or asking, having to come to the government and ask for things. And so,
Yeah, and it really don't make no sense when he said it because it's like no prison for drug offenses. Are you talking about people using drugs or selling them? So why would you send a person selling drugs to rehabilitation unless you had some program that's what gonna stop them from feeling like they need to sell drugs? You know what I mean? So it's like
yeah,
he put
it's
it out there, but he didn't really give it any kind of appropriate context.
it's so fitting because when you look at the timeliness of it and you look at the waves of white drug use that's been happening when you're talking methamphetamines or fentanyl and sort of these other drugs.
Yeah,
Now that the drug focus and the sort of quote unquote epidemic of drug use is not just crack cocaine or marijuana use. Right now, it's fentanyl, it's sort of these other white consumer drugs,
right.
right? That
Exactly.
would otherwise, if you use those tough on crime policies that the Democrats instituted in the 80s and in the 90s,
Yep.
those laws were to be applied evenly now, you would
Yep.
have a lot of the people going to jail for drug possession will look way different. So now,
Exactly.
oh, it's so timely that all of a sudden you want to do away with those very laws. Now that we're sort of getting off drugs, as it were, in those
Right.
proportionate numbers, and other people are starting to fall into them. Now
Right.
the law changes, and we're supposed to assume that's a benefit to us. As
Right.
talking to the black representation.
Right. Which is a racist state of mind because now you stereotyping. So you talk
Yeah.
drugs and people just think, oh, that's good for black people. And it's like, well, what about the
Talk-
thousands of black people that didn't have drug problems? So,
Right. And
it's
he's talking to the black misrepresentation or the black misleadership.
right.
So he's talking to them. So in a sense, by speaking about drug use and everything, uh, he's talking to them, making the assumption that that's going to be something that it pertains exclusively to them, as if it's
Right.
something you're doing for them.
Yeah. Well, really, it's like affirmative action. It's going to be an affirmative action type of deal where it sounds good, like it'll benefit black people, but it's really going to be beneficial to other people more so than us.
Okay, man. Well,
Well, yeah.
I have the next highlighted topic if you want to
No,
sort of,
go ahead. Just jump into it.
and we got so this says Keystone. I'll just read this off real quick. Keystone Pipeline, racial equity, 1776 Commission, immigration, and more. Biden also extended the pause on student loan repayments, nationwide restrictions on evictions and foreclosures. The president signed an order launching a government-wide initiative directing every federal agency to review its state of racial equity and deliver an action plan within 200 days to address any disparities in policies and programs. And the quote is, delivering on racial justice will require that the administration takes a comprehensive approach to embed equity in every aspect of our policy making and decision making, Biden's domestic chief Susan Rice said Tuesday. My comment on this, bro, is that again, this broad language and where we're getting missed in the gaps here, to where when first of all, student loan repayments, that sounds good on the surface, extending a moratorium on that, evictions and foreclosures. When you look at a nation that's suffering because of the recent COVID onslaught, and people are not working and small businesses are getting ran out, and everybody's suffering across the board. When you look at something like this, is again, it's not anything that's specific to us, because again, what we're talking about is what how Biden and Harris is going to be beneficial to us in particular, or what are we going to get out of our vote. Student loan repayments, first of all, white America and other people probably benefit uh, more from student loan moratorium than black people will, because according to their own statistics, We are not overrepresented in that population that goes on to college and incurs student loan debt.
Right.
That's mainly white folks that are going to have student loan debt. So that's not for us. If anything, that will give them an additional financial leg up on us because one of the number one financial burdens typical of white people, the white majority, is student loan. And that's
Exactly.
one of the things they tend to have uniquely that in comparison to us. This whole racial equity, disparities in policies and programs, like we were talking before, they broaden the umbrella of what it means to be a minority, of what it means to be a racialized or minority group. So when you bring in millions of immigrants who did not, through their blood, sweat, and tears, establish and build this country, who are not suffering from post traumatic syndrome generationally, not just from slavery, but each subsequent generation that experiences a unique trauma that's built upon the historical legacy. When you have groups that come in as immigrants by the millions and now all of a sudden they're racialized and they're counted as victims of racism on par with native black Americans, equally as we are. They're considered equal victims of racism. I have nothing against immigrant groups, for example, but when you make a conscious decision to migrate to a place and then there are repercussions and you know what you're getting into, that's quite different than inheriting a legacy that you have no decision in. And
Yeah.
when Biden says things like racial equality, it's disingenuous
Yeah.
because we
And
know
it's a lie.
he doesn't mean us exclusively. What do you think?
Right. And it's a lie because they haven't shared that burden equally. Because you can just look at the laws. Like I haven't seen any constitutional um imprint or print in general that specifically discriminates against those other groups. So there's no one fifth law that applies to Hispanics, or there's no one fifth law that applies to homosexuals, or things like that, of that nature. There's really there's no large number of like um law that specifically discriminated against those group of people to the magnitude that you can see it and the obviousness of it as it pertains to black people. So you can look at the history book, because the worst thing I would say that America really did to themselves is they documented everything that they did to black people. Okay. So you can look up the laws that says black people can't do this, they can't do that. Black people are not human, or whatever, petting zoos for black people. Like you can look this stuff up in history. So this is not like somebody's imagination or somebody's conscience eating away at them because they might be ashamed of who they are. That's not what black people are suffering from. We're suffering from things that happen that can be proven by fact, by history. But when it comes to like social preference, or these preferences that they talk about, like if I decide to be, I'm gonna just throw it out there, if I decide to be a pimp, right, and that's my social lifestyle, everything that comes along with that, like you're saying, is voluntarily. Like I know what happens if you get into that world, or if I choose to be a gang member, I know what happens when you get into that type of lifestyle. So you can't compare that to something on the level of slavery, and then slavery converting itself to prison, and in prison, simultaneously thriving amongst black codes and racial discrimination, on a legal level, state and federal.
Right.
So I think it's just, you have to look at it and say, man, that's just a lie. Like, stop telling that lie that everybody suffered to the same extent as black people, because it's flat out a lie. And once you say it's simple like that, then we don't have to go ahead and have these long conversations about what's the difference between the two. It's like, we ain't got to talk about the differences. Just show me where it says that a homosexual is one fifth of a person, or that they don't have the right to vote because they're homosexuals specifically. Show me where it says that in the law, and then maybe we can have a conversation.
Well, here's the thing, and I think, and I agree. And what you're speaking to is a historical legacy. It's like if you take two children and one children you raise and you leave them in the basement, right? And you bring food down and slide it under the door and you beat them once a week and you threaten them and you call them nigger and you call them, bitch, nigger, excuse my French, or you call them all sorts of things every day as they're growing up. And all of a sudden they hit 10 years old. Yeah, everything you did to them is in the past, technically. But then you bring the stepchild into the same household. And the child that was raised in the basement of the house says, wait a minute, though. I was made to scrub and clean the house and keep it up and everything like this, keep the house up. And I'm all messed up because I got beat and everything like this. But you're bringing this stepchild in here from an entirely different house. And just because they have dark skin or they got a switch in their step or whatever characteristic you want to define, and you're going to tell me that we suffer on equal grounds. More so, even more than that, you're saying, okay, yeah, you suffered in the past. Let's just start from this point and move forward.
Right.
But the problem is the child that was raised in the basement, they're due more reparation because they suffered more damage. So it's unrealistic and it's disingenuous to think they'll be able to compete with that other child moving forward.
Exactly.
That other child was raised in a house where they had wholesome food, they had good nutrition, they had good psychologically, a good psychology of self and a positive self image. And they were raised where they could focus on their mathematics and their reading. They didn't have all these other concerns that were impediments to their learning, right? You can't just say, okay, you two compete fairly and move forward. I think anybody that has sense and critical thinking and even common sense would would understand that. But I think, Kanan, what we run up against is people that don't want to face reality and that they actually what they lack is courage to have these conversations. I think there are people that tune in the media. It's an easy thing to do to just listen to the mainstream, to
Hmm.
follow the crowd, and to avoid conflict. And in
Right.
order to avoid conflict, they go with the crowd, and that's the easiest and most popular thing to do. And I think what we're looking at is a lack of intellectual honesty and courage.
Yep. That's true. I agree, man. I agree with that. Man, but yeah, we can go on with that for forever. But kind of like you said, to try to redirect it. So we are talking about, politics and how this new administration is going to impact Black people specifically, whether it's good or bad. So like you said, with COVID, I feel like everything, all the policies that they push with COVID is gonna predominantly have a negative impact on the Black community because it's just gonna usher more Black people right back into the medical system, in which we already know how the medical industry has treated Black people. So now this is just another fear tactic. Not that COVID isn't real, so not to be offensive to people who may have suffered from COVID or whatever, but I do believe that you can see the racial undertone with COVID to just get Black people to go right back into the hospitals and be experimented on and treated unfairly with vaccinations or however they plan on doing all these things. I don't think that Black people specifically are going to benefit from the impact of COVID related policies, whether it be restricting our travel, which Black people have just now becoming more and more open as I see to traveling abroad and things like that, and looking for places to just experience a new lifestyle. But now you just see that kind of blocked out the way because it's travel
Right,
restrictions. Um,
right,
Meanwhile, other people are still traveling, but it's not going to be as common for poor people to travel. But you better believe that if you're a politician or if you got the money, you're going to be able to travel freely. So that's why I understand they want to stop the spread, but how is it really affecting us and impacting us? Is it really protecting us? You can't say that a mask is going to protect you, but you can't fly with a mask on. Just don't make sense to me. So I think it's just another way to kind of um, keep us controlled more so than anything. And you did touch on economic recovery with the stimulus package about well, I think you was talking about the student loans.
Oh yeah.
But like you said, it ain't a whole lot of black people that got student loan debt, and if they do, it's gonna be minor. And I would say to that, if you couldn't pay the student loan debt, then them paying it is not really going to change your financial situation if you really think
Not
about
gonna
it.
bridge
It'll
the
eliminate that one bill, but are you making more money for the future? Because if you couldn't pay off a $2,000, $3,000 bill in the first place, then that was a problem, because your loan debt is going to be significantly different than the average student loan debt of somebody with a 4 years bachelor that went to a major university. They got $50,000 in debt. You knock off 10,000, that's not a lot for them, but that could easily be all of the debt that you had as an African American. And you might feel that that's a financial burden uplift, but is it really is it really benefiting you as a community? Is that going to help you buy land? Is that
well
going to help you?
in Kanan, is it gonna close the racial wealth gap?
Right, and it won't.
You're absolutely right. It's not. If our financial situation is to where even a $60,000 or more or whatever student loan debt, if we can't afford to pay that, but there's already a racial wealth gap, is that relieving that debt gonna close the gap? And the answer is no.
Even if they and I think it's kind of like a fast one. They pulling a fast one because when you think about it, um, to for them to alleviate that debt or reduce it or forgive it, whatever term they use, that ain't that's not the same as even giving a person $10,000 as a stimulus, right? So you're still looking at different dynamics because they don't really have to put that money up front. They have to have that money covered. So they'll cover it some kind of way with another policy so that everything balances out financially. But it's not monetary in value. So you can't go and do whatever you want with it. It's almost like if you get a home loan, they'll give you that loan specifically for buying a home. But that'll be different if they just gave you $150,000 in cash, because you can do some more things with it. You can probably start a business, or like you could do other things. So they'll say, we'll give you $200,000 to buy a house, but we're not just going to give you $200,000 to go do whatever you want with it, because that still gives you more control. It might, you know it might close certain economic gaps, because now you got cash value. So I think when people really look at it from that standpoint about it closing the racial wealth gap, it definitely won't, especially if we're not talking cash value where we get to decide how we want to put that money towards our finances. So I think it's very different to say we'll forgive a federal debt, because most of the loans is going to be federal loans, um, which is money that is covered through taxes, various taxes. So all of those things, I'm not an expert in like finances, but by any means, but I will say that it's a lot easier for citizens to get federal money because of the restrictions about how politics have to spend it. So to forgive it is not really giving you anything. It's just kind of writing it off for now, and then they'll find a way to take it out of Social Security or raise taxes 10 years from now, blah blah blah. So you really gonna pay for it. Somebody's gonna pay for it, but they can put it on hold, if that
That's
makes sense.
true. If you have a person that has $100,000, for example, when you do and Tone Talks, I reference Tone Talks ADOS movement, not as a whole, as certain things that they talk about. You can get a lot of good information from different sources. In this case, when I reference them, he does a good job at breaking down the racial wealth gaps and disparities.
Okay.
Think on average, something like, say, on the East Coast, like in Boston, the average Black family is worth $8, right? Once you subtract the family vehicle, which is a depreciating asset. Whereas you look at Kamala Harris lineage. sort of the Indian, um, I know tribe isn't the correct word, but like sort of the faction from the Indian society that she comes from, right? They may have an income of $300,000, and it's something really high like that. So it's like if you have a person that has on average $300,000
Mm-hmm.
of wealth, meaning whether it's liquid, whether it's in assets that are movable or exchangeable, whether it's in it's a tangible legacy. You have a person that's worth $8. That person that's worth $8, if you forgive $100,000 debt that they have, they still have $8
Mm-hmm.
in comparison to the person that has 300,000. So it's not a positive move.
Right.
I mean, the person had $8 and then they went to college and they incurred an additional $50,000 in debt, which did not close the gap.
Mm-hmm.
So now they're worth negative $409,000 or
Right.
$49,000 and some change. So you wipe that out and they still only net $8
Right.
in terms of closing a gap. So best case scenario, they get a job working for someone else who has an established wealth business, and they wind up building that other person's business, whether they're working in the bank industry or a store or retail. See, they're building someone else's they're building someone else's equity. They're building
Right.
someone else's business, and they're getting a salary for it, which then has to turn around and pay for goods and services, which distribution they don't own.
Right.
So it's a rules, it's a game, it's a shell game, right? One thing you said, Kanan, that sort of and I know this is a touchy topic, and you may, since bro, you do most of the editing, you may, have to be careful with YouTube. I know it's a trigger word, but the COVID
Right.
thing, one thing that had come to my attention was the testing, wherein it sort of feeds into this whole idea that okay, they bolster all these numbers of people that are coming up positive, and then they institute these consequences as a result. So if they can have millions of people positive, then all of a sudden they can start requiring these masks and these shots and these vaccinations, these
Right.
travel bans and all this, or restrictions rather. And I learned about a cycle threshold, which is a value they apply to the testing procedure. And I recall Dr. Fauci before this whole COVID wave, he, from his own mouth, and anybody can look up this quote, he says cycle threshold values that they apply to testings that are 35 or higher might as well be thrown out in terms of positive results because they don't mean anything.
Mm.
And what it means is when you test a person's blood count for the presence of a virus, if you test, for example, 100,000 blood cells, and you're looking for one blood cell, if you find one in every 100,000, right, that might be a negligible result because that one virus in 100,000 blood cells is basically there's not enough there to do anything, to make the person sick, to do anything. It's so low that it
Mm.
means it's only there because the body has effectively shut it down. And
Gotcha.
any human being's immune system and blood count at any given snapshot, you could basically come up with positive results for almost anything because there's so much in our blood, in our immune system based on encountering different viruses and stuff. That means if they come into a black community and they use a high cycle threshold, like 35 or 40, basically what they're doing is they're taking a huge amount of blood cells to find one or a very small amount of virus, and then they come up with a positive. When they very well know that using such a high threshold means they're capturing a very minimal amount. And in order to do tests responsibly, they need to use 25 or less as a cycle threshold value. Now, here's the thing: the top testing sites, right, is revealed that they typically use 35 and 40.
Oh,
Now,
I know
that's irresponsible. Now, when I went to find what were the cycle threshold values they were using in Minnesota to declare sort of these skyrocketing positive values, positive test results? They are not divulging the cycle threshold values at this time. They say that information is not available. It's available in Florida, for example, which it was deemed to be high. So expect to see the mainstream media speaking more on it. Yeah, we got to be more responsible with these threshold values. And I'm sure they'll come up with something if they can't sweep it under the rug. But my thing is this, if they don't have to say, what are they doing when they come to Black communities? Are they using high cycle threshold values that's going to net them more positive results for COVID? And hence, hey, Black people, you are 20 times more likely to be, to die from everything under the sun. We need you to take the vaccine, right? Look at
Mhm.
this, Black people, it's you. It's always you. Here you are negative again. We gonna look out for you because we care. Take this vaccine, which is in a trial phase. Footnote. But yeah, it just sparked me. It just triggered my memory on that when you mentioned the whole COVID testing thing. Because I think, bro, in order for them to project a negative image of us around the world, right, here and around the world, one key thing is that people don't encounter us. They have to encounter us in Real Housewives of Atlanta or
Right.
Girls Trip, or pimping, crimping, sea walking, twerking video, right?
Mhm.
All these things, that has to be the predominant face of Black America. The problem is when we start actually traveling, people encounter us, we encounter them, and we start to project who we are. Not only do we wake up to the world abroad and broaden our own horizons, people get wake up calls and realizations because we are there. Not only other people from other nations, but I would say Black people who are descendants of slavery, right, in other nations. And I think a shutdown just, man, it's just another one of those damn historical coincidences, those pesky historical coincidences
Right.
that seem to haunt us at every generation, bro.
Exactly. I agree, man. It's like eventually you just gotta we really have to start calling it like we see it. Now, like I said, I don't mind being proven wrong or anything, but I'm not gonna overlook these, like you said, coincidences, like they don't have a like it's not a pattern. Because with us it's a pattern, with them it's a coincidence. And it's like, I think that's a pattern too. Like you said, they monitor us so much, they have so much data and information on us. We're always somebody's, some Europeans case study or study in some
Right,
kind of way. So
right.
it's like they collect all of this data on us where they can describe us to a T almost when you think about it in terms of like they'll look at us speaking slang, but they won't just write it off as like, oh, these ignorant people talking slang. They gonna dissect it. They gonna send task forces. They gonna know they want to send informants to understand our language so in depth that they can start interpreting and putting their own definitions to it where we get confused and let them tell us that what it is, even though we might have created it. So, and it's like when you look at that and really think about it, it's like, man, they study everything about us.
And you,
And we don't do that with them because, first of all, we're not infatuated with them. And then, there's no, we don't want to control them. So we're not looking to really understand other groups of people. But like you say, I mean, but like, if you look into the history of things like Egyptology, it's like, why are they studying the Egypts like a science, but you don't really see them study, like there's no Americantology or whatever. You know what I mean? Like nobody's sitting
Egyptology,
around.
brother, and let me throw in there original Hebrews, the original biblical Hebrews. I know
Mhm.
that's touchy, but hey, you know what? At one point, the original people, we was made from dirt of the earth, not from the white sands of the beach.
Right. No, that's real. And
It's a
it
lot.
is it's touchy for some, but like me, I say, um, it's not touchy for me because I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, because like to me, I look at the bigger picture and I'm like, we know that there's way more to black people than has been explained to us over the past 500 years at least. I would say minimum, probably longer than that. But as far as what's explained to us, where we come from, how we've traveled the earth, and the science and knowledge that we've had, and our languages, all of that stuff has been hidden or has been a complete lie, fabricated by other people. And so to hear what you just said is not surprising to me, because it's still letting me know that there's a deeper root of where black people come from. Now, what people want to get into arguments about is kind of like religion. Like some people, religion is touchy for them, but I've never been offended by things people say religiously, because I'm just gonna look into it for myself.
That's
Um,
how I am.
yeah, if you secure in what you really believe, I don't think you really would have a problem with somebody introducing a different idea or concept or truth. You just look into it and say, man, if that's true, cool. Instead of taking it so personal, like I've been tricked and now I have to change my perception. It's like, well, you don't got to go that far, but you could at least take it for what it is. And I don't know. That's just me. But anyway, so yeah, so like, they study us so in depth that I think it's an obsession. And we have to start looking at it like that. Like, dude, y'all, these people are obsessed with us to the point where they'll do like a Tuskegee experiment. Like, they want to see how this impacts black people. And they'll do they'll fund it. They put thousands of millions of dollars into studying and just researching us as a people. And I think we don't really understand, like, um that's a problem. Like, nobody should be that caught up in what you're doing, to the point where they would just be so obsessed and infatuated with you. It's a weird obsession that I think we just overlook, and then we had the nerves to think that with something like COVID, that they're not going to use that as an opportunity, another opportunity to study us for whatever it is they're trying to figure out. How does COVID affect people? Melanin. I don't know. Who knows what they're trying to figure out? They might be trying to find new beauty care products. Whatever it is, we have to be aware of it, and we have to start calling it out for what it is.
And I think it's like this, man. I agree with you. I like to use this analogy because there's so much that could be said. You said so much. There's so much that could be said to that. But in this analogy I love to use is this: water, air, right? Breathable air, land, all these things exist in nature. They should be natural. They're free. People came along and they try to commoditize everything. So you have to buy things at a price that are free. And when I say that, I mean not just land, not just, water, but now, there's a price attached to clean air. And don't be surprised that once it's able to be commoditized, right, there'll be a price tag on that. And I say that to say this: knowledge and information is something like truth. Truth is something that is. And just like we have the right to walk outside and breathe, we have the right to know ourselves, the Most High, the universe. But what's happened is, just like rain, just like lake water, they've come with artificial machinery and industry, and they sucked it up and they put it into little plastic bottles, right? That will harm the environment, and then they sell it to you.
Mm-hmm.
They say, here is water, it's pure, right? It's $2, and you buy that, and then you got to come back for more. And what water is something very essential that you need to survive, right? But whether you have to buy it in a plastic bottle or pay a bill that they pipe it through some pipes, shout out to Flint, Michigan, that you have to pay for this stuff. When guess what? It rains, bro. It rains in reality on the forecast. Clouds come and this stuff pours down from the heavens. And if you had a bin to catch it, there's no way in hell we have to rely on something that goes through their treatment facilities. I say that to say things like truth, our history, philosophy, knowledge that you and I are kicking around, right? We don't need to go to their institutions to read from sort of their the filters of their history
Right.
to talk about it. That's one of the things that's good about what we're doing here. And critical thinkers, uh, we can provide that life sustaining natural resource, which is truth, to people. And just sort of when you said, you mentioned something that sort of got me on that, but yeah, man, I just wanted to say that. And oh, them studying us so much to the extent like, yo, that's something that's necessary when you, for example, depend on something. And we've been dependent on not only as forced labor, we've been dependent on as a model of humanity itself. See, here's the thing. If you are not a humane being, then it's not possible for you to act like a human being. And if you are a vampire, right,
Mm-hmm.
you need a life sustaining blood and essence from an actual human. Someone that is undead needs someone that is alive. Why? Because they need to suck off of them and leech off of them to infuse themselves with color, with vitality. And in the absence of human beings, non humans will not have a zest or a zeal for life. It will be a quick degradation to something like the Dark Ages or, something out of that. And we know history. We know what happened when the Moors came into Europe and the Iberian
Right.
Peninsula. We know sort of the salt of the earth and what it does, how it infuses things with life. So there
Mm-hmm.
is, yes, this infatuation, like Dracula's infatuated with, the people out, the regular people.
Yeah.
There's a connection there that's necessary that you have to study. You have to figure it out because you have to know how to model yourself and infuse yourself with actual living. Otherwise, they know, and I'm not talking all white people, right?
No,
Obviously,
I know. I get
let
what
me
you
make
mean.
that disclaimer.
Hey, I know,
I
right?
mean the abusive sort of life sucking force of white supremacy and that devilment. And then now that's part and parcel of what it is.
Oh man, that's dope. I like that. And it's true. Like you said, that's still in addition to it, just being well said, it's true. You know, it's very true in nature in what you say. And that's what we have been experiencing and we can see it, we can witness it. And I think we need platforms like this so that we can actually speak on it because they don't let us speak on it to the masses because like you said they want to control a certain type of image of us. So, they ain't going to invite us on CNN to have these type of conversations and actually let us talk. They'll invite us on CNN to try to humiliate us. So, they might invite a rapper or something on CNN to speak for the black community. Like, oh, how convenient, you
Speak
know.
of
But
politics, bro. They'll bring a comedian or an athlete up there
yeah,
to talk about financial politics.
right, exactly. And everybody just eat it up like, oh my God, did you see
Yeah,
that? And it's like, come on, man. Like he
Charles
bypassed
Barkley. Charles
all of
Barkley,
the
what you think about the state of Black America and reparation? I think niggas can make it down there. I pulled myself up.
right. Yep. Just bypass that whole book of scholars. Just go ask Charles Barkley. He know.
Right, don't talk to the brother right there with the degree who's been studying and talking
No.
about. Nah, don't
They'll
talk.
let him
To
they'll let him hold the camera maybe. But
right,
they
right.
ain't gonna let him talk. So
But hey,
no,
bro,
that's true.
I'll
But
I'll rattle off if it's good with you. I know we've talked forever, man, and that good information exchange. If you want, I can just read the rest of these sort of topics, and then you can just touch on whichever ones you want to highlight or touch on,
all right,
and then
that's cool. Yeah, let's
we'll
do that.
wrap up. So I'll just read the rest of them off. It's not that much more. Keep in mind, audience, family, we just highlighted some of this from an article from Biden's first day and first 100 days. Some of this we've touched on before, and some of it we have not yet. And after I read this song, Mr. Kanan is gonna go in on what captures what he wants to speak of. So let's see. Rescinding Trump's 1776 commission, a panel Trump established as a response to the New York Times 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize winning collection that focused on America's history with slavery. Revoking Trump's plan to exclude non-citizens from the census, prohibiting workplace discrimination in the federal government based on sexual orientation and gender identity, and directing federal agencies to ensure protections for LGBTQ people are included in anti-discrimination statutes. Revoking Trump's 2017 Interior Enforcement executive order, which broadened the categories of undocumented immigrants subject for removal, restarted the secure let's see, what is that? Restarted the Secure Communities Program and supported the federal deportation program. Scrolling down here, more. Biden introduces 1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package that includes $1,400 checks. Other orders confirmed by Biden's team include revoking the ban on military service by transgender Americans and reversing the quote unquote Mexico City policy, which blocks federal funding for non-governmental organizations that provide abortion services abroad. Next up, he will sign additional executive order actions related to climate change, expanding access to health care, particularly for low-income women and women of color, and on immigration border policies, excluding the process of reuniting families separated at the US-Mexican border. And last up, let's see, I got just a couple more. Immediately upon taking office, it will include an 8-year pathway to citizenship for immigrants living in the USA without legal status. Biden names White House team to work on racial equality, immigration, and other domestic policy priorities. Last but not last and also least is the others. Travel ban, a stain on nation. So basically revoking the travel ban to certain quote unquote Muslim countries, and these Libya, Iran, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, North Korea, and Venezuela, for example, brought lessening the travel bans to and fro these places. Eritrea, uh, Kyrgyzstan, hope I'm saying that right, and Myanmar in Nigeria. And Biden says these bans were rooted in xenophobia and religious animus, and President-elect Biden has been clear that we will not turn our back on our values with discriminatory bans on entry to the United States. All right, bro, that was a lot. Anything you want to touch on?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So a quick response to all of that is, like I said, I really don't trust the politicians. So even if it did sound good, I would still be very skeptical, because I know that black people are not in a position to really, I can't say we're not in a position, but we won't be in a position to benefit from any of it, because there's really no collective body of black people that we can trust to if the government decided to give us something, how is it really going to be regulated? We need a body of people we can trust, like everybody else has. Like there's representatives for Hispanics, and
Right,
obviously the Hispanic people trust them, so that if they do decide to um uplift these bans, the Hispanics is gonna know who to go to get their green cards and citizenships. Like it's gonna be a thorough process. We don't have that, because if they give anything to black people, I don't want it going to Al Sharpton and all those people that Joe Biden was talking to earlier. Like I'm like, I don't trust them no more than I trust the other politicians, because I'm like, NAACP been around for a long time, and um they very kind of iffy in my opinion. So I'm like, it really don't benefit us. But to get specific, I wanted to just kind of touch on the immigration. I think it's weird that Biden is saying that he wants to uplift these bans um for immigration, and he wants to allow people who are already in America a easy pathway to citizenship, and he don't want to have these restrictions to get in the country, but at the same time, you restricting people based off COVID from coming to the country, and specifically Somalia, because we know that in America, Somalians as an African nation, um, African people, they have came to America and they got a pretty nice leg up on a lot of people, right? And coincidentally, they want to start banning them from entering this country. And I'm like, so how come the immigration seems to never really favor African nations? Is something that really sticks out to me. They always try to find a way to exclude African nations from immigration rights. So I will be interested to see how many undocumented Somalians or Nigerians will benefit from this pathway or this pipeline to citizenship. Or is it going to be what we've been seeing? The Nigerians and Somalians will get deported, but the Hispanics get to stay, because then once they get the Hispanics to be citizen, they won't need our vote next election because they'll have enough documented Hispanic citizens where the black vote won't even really count much. It won't be a swing vote. It won't be a vote that you have to get to win a certain office once you have the documented immigrants, specifically the Hispanic people, because they already outnumber us. So we already know they'll have the numbers. So once they get the document, you won't even need the black vote to win the Democratic parties. And I think that's huge. So directly, I would say that's a negative impact on us. If you really read between the lines of what they're trying to do, why would they be so in a rush all of a sudden to just give anybody citizenship in America? They've never That's never really been something that you've seen done. And then kind of have a contradictory policy towards it, where we'll say we don't want to restrict people from coming here unless you got COVID, and those places just happen to be places where we have high number of immigrants in America, which is Somalians and Nigerians. You see a lot of them, especially in certain states of immigration, like California's and Midwest places, all over. So yeah, real quick on that, I would say overall immigration, from what I'm hearing, is not going to benefit black people. Um, you talked about uh again, you said something about Trump. A lot of it sound like he's just trying to undo what Trump did and try to use that to appeal to black people to get our support, but underhandedly not really doing nothing for us in a nutshell. So not to get too long into it, because you said a lot, man, and I think I could go on for hours if I really try to comb through it all on this segment.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
I understand
but
that.
I just wanted to touch the immigration because I think that's a big one. It's a word that we probably gonna hear a lot next to COVID, and I think that we have to be very cautious about what they're doing with immigration. And if we support it, we need to make sure that they open that they open those opportunities up to African nations, and that African citizens will get, I mean, African immigrants will get easy paths to citizenship. Because if we find ourselves in a position where we have to fend for ourselves, the way I look at it is who will we have to partner up with? If we have to partner up with immigrants, are we going to partner up with the Hispanics, or are we going to partner up with Somalians and Nigerians if we are put at the bottom of the totem pole and just fending for ourselves? Who's going to be more likely for us to cling to? And I would have to just say we have to rely on the people who look more like us. As crazy as that might sound to some people, it's like, hey, I don't have no problem with Hispanic people, but Hispanic people, um, you can go through the history and say, hey, we all share genetics and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't speak their language, they don't speak my language, and we don't look alike. And that's really all that I can boil it down to, is to say, hey, if I'm going to rely on somebody to help me through something, I'd rather see more African immigrants come to this country and help us build with them so that we can have access to natural resources in Africa, because Africa has a lot of natural resources that can benefit us as a black people if we get our stuff together. But I don't see Hispanics really letting us come down to Mexico, getting in on whatever it is they got going. Not as easy as we probably can do it with like I said, people that look like us, and that's just raw and upfront.
So yeah, man. Uh, One thing you said is a couple of things from that quick list that touched on me, but just real quick to what you were saying, I would say I agree to the extent that when you're talking immigration, obviously the United States discriminates in terms of who they allow in greater numbers. I think when it comes to Afrocentric nations or African nations or even just Black immigrants like Black Cubans, for example, I think oftentimes the gatekeepers say, okay, we'll allow Africans in that tend to be more anti Black American per se, more anti American descendant of slaves. It seems like they will sort of filter in certain Africans to the best that they're able to control the attitudes towards Native Black Americans in the smaller numbers that they're willing to let in terms of Black immigrants. They want to let more of those sorts in that will not identify with us. I think if you're an African from Nigeria, Liberia, or Cameroon or somewhere that tends to identify more politically or even genetically or just even in terms of identity more with Black Americans, that's one thing that could get you real quick stricken from could get your application turned down.
Right, right.
But
Yep.
just real quick, what I wanted to say, quick man, was this 1.9 trillion COVID relief package. I just wanted to note when we're talking about reparations, there's no money. The obvious elephant in the room is anytime something just pops up around the corner, IMG, big banks get themselves in trouble. All of a sudden, here's this $1 trillion over here. Here's $2
Right.
trillion over there. We can bail out the housing market. We can bail out the banks. We can bail out GM. And now we got 1.9 trillion to come up with syringes and stuff and send people $1,400 that they're going to have to turn right around and give back to Kroger's. Just to comment. This caught my eye. The abortion services. We know historically what they're trying to do with the eugenics movement and how they tried and the advent of birth control and abortion services and what that all meant. Look up Margaret Sanger, the eugenics movement, and the abortion industry that was later termed Planned Parenthood. Don't really have to go over that, but it's odd that they want to, start kicking down money for that now. Okay, uh, I think that was just sort of one of the couple things, and I just wanted to say in general, I agree with you, man. I don't have anything against Latinos or other immigrants for that matter. I believe that people are and can be people. The problem is this sort of filter of white supremacy makes everything problematic. And we exist in a zero sum society where capitalism has made it necessary to compete with other groups. Everything is a competition for resources and recognition. And I think one of their tried and true tactics is bring in immigrants whenever Black folks stand to gain something, bring in immigrants and sort of wash us out.
Yep.
Sadly, I think they use that tactic, like we said, they prefer white immigrants and then they'll use Latino immigrants and then they'll use African immigrants when push comes to shove. But like those preferential groups seem to fit the scale of anti Black attitudes. White immigrants are more likely to have anti Black American attitudes, followed by Latinos, who something like 54% of them actually self identify as Caucasian on the census.
Right. Yep.
And finally, you got your African groups who, though they're least likely to have anti Black attitudes, naturally, a lot of them are sort of indoctrinated first, don't hang
Right.
around with those Akatas and, uh,
They're
you know,
more strict on the stipulation with them. So if they hang out with black people, they'll be more strict on
well,
deporting them.
yeah. Well, and yeah, white supremacy is taking a gamble when they bring these immigrants
Yep.
in that sense, in reality. And I just wanted to say that, yeah, we as Black people, first and foremost, like other groups, we have the right to identify with us. establish our identity, and look out for ourselves. And once you get your own chips, you can come to the poker table. The worst thing to do is to come to the table talking about you negotiating and you've got no resources. That's why we get laughed at, we get backhanded, and we get dismissed out of hand. So yeah, man.
No, that's true. Yeah, I did overlook the abortion thing, but yeah, that's huge too, and that definitely ain't gonna benefit us. I don't see that benefiting us at all. If anything, they gonna try to impose that more in the black communities to lessen the numbers of just black births in general. Cause and the way that I look at it,
Check.
the sooner they don't have to deal with us, the better for them in their mind. So they like, hey, let's push abortions in the black community. They'll spend a lot of money on that. But again, like you said, when we asking for money to do something positive, reparations or whatever, they don't got no money, but they got
Yeah,
money for abortion clinics. That don't make no kind of sense.
of
So
course
yeah,
not, man. Not to the intelligent mind, brother.
no. Like I said, I ain't got no problems with them, but just like they don't, it's basically on the equal playing ground. Like I don't think Hispanics have a problem with blacks, but they're gonna do what's best for them first, and I just don't see a problem with that. Like we should think like that and not feel ashamed of it or feel like oh, we're pro black because they always want to give us a label when we
Right.
look out for ourselves. But I'm like, man, Asians do it. Like Asian people look out for Asian people, man, and if
Everybody else is allowed to do it except for us, bro.
yeah, and we got to just stop allowing that to be like our narrative. Like, stop trying to fit in people's idea, what they want to have for us, and we can say, yeah, man. Like I said, it might be a term for it. They might say, oh, I'm racist or something. I'm like, whatever. They call us all kind of names, but I know that I'm not that, so I'm not really worried about it. And when I say, I will reach out to the Somalians before I reach out to somebody who I don't look like, because I'm like, yeah, I don't speak Somalian. I don't know their language, but I can't deny that these people look more like me. And naturally, you should cling to something that is more of your kind, that looks like you, because you
Yeah,
like
hell
that's
yeah. You have to make choices. Yeah, I agree, bro.
yeah, but no, but like I said, I'll be going on forever about this, but
Yeah, yeah. Hell yeah. I mean, like if it comes down to it, right. You
yeah,
gotta go with what makes more sense. Yeah, right.